The planet which we dwell upon has a metaphysical history that began nearly 76,000 years ago. At the beginning, the appearance of second and third density bodily forms, in many cases, would have been more like one to the other. In the case of our planetary sphere, the process was interrupted by those who incarnated here from the planetary sphere we call Mars. They were adjusted by genetic changing, and therefore there was some difference which was of a very noticeable variety, rather than the gradual raising of the bipedal forms upon our second density level to third density level. This has nothing to do with the so-called placement of the soul. This has only to do with the circumstances of the influx of those from that culture. The Confederation member, known at that time as Yahweh, began transferring the population of Mars to planet Earth. Thus, the first of those to come here, who looked like us, were brought from the red planet, Mars. The first entities, therefore, were of this race, as we may call it, manipulated somewhat by those who were guardians at that time. These entities arrived, or were preserved, for the experience upon our sphere by a type of birthing which is non-reproductive, but consists of preparing genetic material for the incarnation of the mind-body-spirit complexes of those entities from the red planet. The race is a combination of the mind-body-spirit complexes of those of the so-called red planet and a careful series of genetic adjustments made by the guardians of that time. This was the first attempt of the Confederation to aid our peoples. The Law of One was named by these guardians as the bringing of the wisdom of the guardians in contact with the entities from the red planet, thus melding the social memory complex of the guardian race and the red planet race. It, however, took an increasing amount of distortion into the application of the Law of One from the viewpoint of other guardians, and it is from this beginning action that the quarantine of this planet was instituted, for it was felt that the free will of those of the red planet had been abridged. There were some second density entities, which made the graduation into third density with no outside stimulus, but only the efficient use of experience. Others of our planetary second density joined the third density cycle due to harvesting efforts, by the same sort of sending of vibratory aid as those of the Confederation send us now. This communication was, however, telepathic rather than telepathic vocal or telepathic written due to the nature of second density beings. A portion of the Confederation which is not working with third density but finds its aid best used in other harvests, that is, the second density harvest, is responsible for aid in these harvests. The Confederation members, which dwell in interplane existence within the planetary complex of vibratory densities, worked with those entities who were in the first cycle. There was also the aid of one of the Confederation, which worked with those of Mars in making the transition. For the most part, the participation was limited, as it was appropriate to allow the full travel of the workings of the confusion mechanism to operate, in order for the planetary entities to develop that which they wished in, shall we say, freedom within their own thinking. It is often the case that a third density planetary cycle will take place in such a way that there need be no outside, shall we say, or other self-aid in the form of information. Rather, the entities themselves are able to work themselves towards the appropriate polarizations and goals of third density learned teachings. The next attempt was approximately 58,000 years ago, continuing for a long period in our measurement, with those of Mu, as we call this race, or mind-body-spirit social complex. The civilization was part of this cycle, experienced early within the cycle, at a time of approximately 53,000 years ago. They were beings of a somewhat primitive nature, but those who had very advanced spiritual distortions. It was a helpful and harmless place, which was washed beneath the ocean during a readjustment of our sphere's tectonic plates, approximately 50,000 years ago, through no action of their own. Those who survived set out and reached many places from South America, onward through the Americas and continuing over a land bridge which no longer exists to Russia and Europe. The Indians of whom we have come to feel some sympathy in our social complex distortions are the descendants of these entities. Like the other incarnates of this cycle, they came from elsewhere. However, these particular entities were largely drawn from a second-density planet which had some difficulty, due to the age of its sun, in achieving third-density life conditions. This planet was from the star system Deneb. After the first cycle, the harvest was none. There was no action taken by the Confederation, except to remain aware of the possibility of a calling for help or understanding among the entities of this density. The Confederation is concerned with the preservation of the conditions conducive to learning. This, for the most part, revolves about the primal distortion of free will. We may see the Confederation's role in the first major cycle as that of the gardener who, knowing the season, is content to wait for the spring. When the springtime does not occur, the seeds do not sprout. Then, it is that the gardener must work in the garden. The first calling of our third density was approximately 46,000 years ago. Those of Maldek were, in some confusion in an incarnate state as to the circumstances of their incarnation. This created a calling. The Confederation sent love and light to these entities. In this case, this was not necessary to give that equal time to the Orion group, for some of our time due to the orientation of the entities. The orientation of these entities was such that the aid of the Confederation was not perceived. What is necessary to balance is opportunity. When there is ignorance, there is no opportunity. When there exists a potential, then each opportunity shall be balanced. This balancing caused by not only the positive and negative orientations of those offering aid, but also the orientation of those requesting aid. There dwell within the Confederation planetary entities, who from their planetary spheres do nothing but send love and light as pure streamings to those who call. This is not in the form of conceptual thought, but of pure and undifferentiated love. A harvesting began taking place in the latter portion, as we measure time-space, of the second cycle, with individuals finding the gateway to intelligent infinity. In the sense of greatness of technology, there were no great societies during this cycle. There was some advancement among those of Deneb, who had chosen to incarnate as a body in what we would call China. There were appropriately positive steps in activating the green ray energy complex in many portions of our planetary sphere, including the Americas, the continent which we call Africa, the island which we call Australia, and that which we know as India, as well as various scattered peoples. None of these became what we would name great, as the greatness of Lemuria or Atlantis, which began to form by the end of this cycle, is known to us due to the formation of strong social complexes, and in the case of Atlantis, very great technological understandings. However, in the South American area of our planetary sphere as we know it, there grew to be a great vibratory distortion towards love. This isolated group had achieved lifespans stretching upwards towards the 900-year lifespan, appropriate to this density. It is well to remember that at that nexus in space-time, great isolation was possible. These entities were harvestable at the end of the second major cycle without ever having formed strong social or technological complexes. At that time, the number of incarnate mind-body-spirit complexes were approximately 345,000 entities. There were approximately 150 entities harvestable. These entities were visited by the Confederation and became desirous of remaining, in order to aid the planetary consciousness. A light being appeared bearing that, which may be called a shield of light. It spoke of the oneness and infinity of all creation and of those things which await those ready for harvest. It described in golden words the beauties of love as lived. It then allowed a telepathic linkage to progressively show those who were interested the plight of third density, when seen as a planetary complex. It then left. As a group, they stayed. There were those peripherally associated with this culture, which did not stay. However, they were not able to be harvested either, and so, beginning at the very highest, shall we say, of the suboctaves of third density, repeated this density. Many of those who have been of a loving nature are not wanderers, but those of this particular origin of second cycle. The harvest of that time, though extremely small, were those entities of extreme distortion towards service to the entities, which now were to repeat the major cycle. These entities have chosen to join their brothers and sisters, as we would call these entities. These entities, therefore, remained in third density, although they could, at any moment present nexus, leave this density through use of intelligent infinity. Thus, there was no harvest, but there were harvestable entities who shall choose the manner of their entrance into fourth dimension. The Confederation became concerned after the second cycle. The Council of Saturn acted only in allowing the entry into third density of other mind-body-spirit complexes of third density, not wanderers, but those who sought further third density experience. This was done randomly, so that free will would not be violated, for there was not yet a call. The entities repeating the third density major cycle have, in some few cases, been able to leave.